The shattered constellation. Dr. Lyra Thess pressed her slender fingers against the flickering console, her lavender skin pulsing with waves of crimson, the Andorian expression of pure terror. Around her, the bridge of the research vessel Starweaver was dying. Smoke curled from shattered circuits while emergency lights cast everything in hellish red. "Hull breach on Deck 4, gasped Navigation Officer Turin, his voice barely audible over the shrieking alarms. "Sealing emergency bulkheads now." Lyra's heart hammered as she surveyed the damage readouts scrolling across her screen. The attack had been swift and merciless. One moment they'd been cataloguing stellar phenomena near the Viridian Expanse. The next, 3 Kreveth marauder ships had emerged from the asteroid field like predators from shadow. The Kreveth were legendary in the worst possible way. Ruthless pirates who preyed on isolated vessels, stealing technology and selling survivors into the black market slave trade. Their ships, ugly amalgamations of stolen parts and salvaged weapons, now surrounded the Starweaver like sharks circling wounded prey. "Life support at 29%, reported Chief Engineer Meris from her station, her normally steady voice cracking. "We've lost atmosphere on 3 decks. I've rerouted what I can, but," she stopped, unable to finish. Lyra didn't need her to. They both knew what it meant. 18 crew members remained alive from their original complement of 24. Most were scientists, researchers, and explorers who'd ventured into space to expand knowledge, not to die at the hands of pirates. Another violent shudder rocked the ship as a Kreveth weapons array fired a precision shot, deliberately striking their already crippled propulsion system. They weren't trying to destroy the Starweaver, they wanted it intact, wanted its precious research data and advanced scanning equipment. And they wanted the crew alive for ransom or worse. "Dr. Thess," Turin said quietly, his bioluminescent markings flickering with despair, "their boarding craft are launching. We have maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, memories flooding through her mind. Her childhood in the crystal gardens of Andoria Prime. Her first glimpse of the stars through a telescope. The day she'd earned her xenobiology doctorate. The faces of her crew, friends, colleagues, people who trusted her leadership. She couldn't let them die. She wouldn't. Lyra's fingers flew across the communications array, rerouting power from non-essential systems. The transmitter sparked and groaned but held together. She opened all frequencies, broadcasting on every channel the Starweaver's damaged systems could manage. "This is Dr. Lyra Thess of the Andorian research vessel Starweaver," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "We are under attack by Kreveth marauders. 18 crew members alive. Life support critical. Coordinates attached. Please, anyone, help us." The message pulsed outward into the void, a desperate beacon cast into an uncaring universe. Lyra knew their chances were microscopic. They were far from established trade routes, days from the nearest Alliance patrol. The Kreveth had chosen their hunting ground well. "Doctor," Meris called out, hope flickering in her voice, "something's receiving our transmission. Strong signal lock from." She paused, her skin shifting to deep purple with confusion, from the Sol system. The bridge fell silent except for the dying ship's groans. Sol. The quarantine zone. Home of the humans. Every child in the Galactic Alliance grew up hearing whispered stories about Sol's third planet. Earth, classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that its native species evolved into something the galaxy feared. Humans. Beings with bones dense enough to withstand crushing gravity. Immune systems that fought off radiation that would kill most sentient life. Predators' eyes that tracked movement with terrifying precision. Bodies built for endurance that seemed almost supernatural. The Alliance had quarantined them over a century ago, deeming them too dangerous for contact. "They can't help us," Turin said flatly. "They're forbidden from leaving their system." Lyra stared at the indicator light blinking on her console, signaling active reception from Sol. What could she say? What would humanity do, isolated and restricted as they were? The Starweaver shuddered again as magnetic grapples locked onto the hull. "They're boarding," Meris whispered. Lyra made her decision. She pressed the transmit button one final time, abandoning protocol, abandoning pride, speaking from her heart to whoever might be listening in that forbidden system. To anyone in Sol who can hear this, we are scientists. We mean no harm. We're dying. Please, please help us. She released the button as the first bulkhead breach alarms screamed through the ship. The Creveth were coming. Breaking the chains. Captain James Harding stood in the Deep Space Command Center buried beneath Colorado's mountains, his jaw clenched as he watched the holographic display replay the alien distress call for the third time. The translator had taken minutes to decode the message, but the desperation in that voice, female, musical, terrified, needed no translation. Confirmed authentic, Captain, reported Lieutenant Sophia Chen from the analysis station. Signal originated from coordinates approximately 4 light-years from the quarantine boundary. Creveth pirate signatures match our surveillance data from the past decade. James ran a hand through his dark hair, mind racing. For 127 years, humanity had respected the quarantine imposed by the Galactic Alliance. Respected it despite the injustice, despite the isolation, despite being labeled too dangerous to join the cosmic community. Earth had listened, learned alien languages, mapped star systems, and built a fleet that had never fired a shot in anger. Until now. What's our response time? James asked. Strike Force Phoenix can launch in 12 minutes, answered Commander Marcus Okonkwo, his second-in-command. FTL calculations show 23 minutes to reach their position. Total time from launch, 35 minutes. 35 minutes. The alien scientist had said life support was critical. Would they even survive that long? Sir, interrupted Legal Officer Amanda Reeves, stepping forward with her tablet, I need to be clear about what we're discussing. Crossing the quarantine line is explicitly forbidden under Alliance law. They've made it abundantly clear that any human vessel leaving Sol will be considered an act of war. Are there exceptions? James pressed, his blue eyes never leaving the holographic image of the dying alien ship. Reeves hesitated, then nodded slowly. The Galactic Maritime Code predates the Alliance itself. Article 7, Section 3, all spacefaring vessels must render aid to distress calls when capable. It supersedes local restrictions. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Every person present understood the weight of this moment. This wasn't just about saving 18 aliens. This was humanity's first real test. Would they prove themselves the monsters the galaxy believed them to be, or something better? James thought of his daughter, Emma, sleeping peacefully in their quarters upstairs. She was 7 years old and had asked him just yesterday when humans would finally be allowed to meet aliens. He'd told her someday. He'd promised her that humanity would prove themselves worthy when the moment came. That moment had arrived. Activate Strike Force Phoenix, James ordered, his voice carrying the ring of absolute command. All ships to launch positions. We cross the line in 15 minutes. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers sprinted to their stations as Earth's defense network came alive. Across orbital platforms circling the planet, warships that had trained for decades but never seen combat powered their engines. James strode toward the hangar where his ship waited, the Tempest, flagship of Strike Force Phoenix. Around him, his crew assembled with practiced efficiency. He'd handpicked every member, the best pilots, engineers, tactical officers, and medical personnel humanity could offer. On the launch deck, the Tempest gleamed under harsh lights, flanked by 6 destroyers and 12 support craft. Medical frigate Salvation took position at the formation center, its trauma bays prepared for alien physiology based on intercepted medical databases. James climbed aboard, settling into the captain's chair as his bridge crew took their stations. Through the forward viewport, he could see Earth hanging in the darkness, blue, green, achingly beautiful. Home. The world the galaxy feared. All ships report ready, Captain, Sophia announced from her tactical station. James opened a fleet-wide channel. His next words would reach every crew member about to make history. This is Captain Harding. In moments, we will violate the quarantine that has bound humanity for over a century. We do this not from aggression, but from principle. Someone called for help, and we can answer. That's what defines us, not our strength, not our endurance, but our choice to use those gifts to protect the vulnerable. He paused, seeing his reflection in the viewport glass, determined, perhaps a little scared, but resolved. For generations, we've been called Deathworlders, monsters, too dangerous to meet. Today we show the galaxy what humanity truly is. Today we prove that our strength exists to defend, not destroy. Strike Force Phoenix, execute jump sequence. Space distorted around the human vessels as exotic matter cores engaged, folding spacetime itself. The ships accelerated beyond light, quantum tunneling through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Behind them, Earth's defensive satellites transmitted a single message to the Galactic Alliance monitoring stations, responding to distress call under Maritime Code Article 7.
No hostile intent.
James watched the chronometer count down. 23 minutes to reach the Star Weaver. He thought of that voice from the distress call, frightened but dignified, asking for help from the very beings her people feared most. "We're coming," he whispered to the stars. "Hold on just a little longer." The Tempest and its escort fleet knifed through the cosmos at impossible speeds, breaking the chains that had bound humanity for over a century, racing toward destiny. Toward first contact. Toward a terrified Andorian scientist who had no idea that the cavalry she'd summoned from nightmares was about to become her salvation. Contact. The Starweaver's bridge descended into chaos as Creveth boarding teams breached the airlock. Lyra heard the metallic screech of cutting torches, smelled the acrid burn of melting hull plating. Turin moved to stand protectively beside her, though what defense two scientists could mount against armed pirates, she couldn't imagine. "Dr. Thess," Meris called from her console, confusion replacing fear. "I'm reading massive FTL ruptures. Multiple signatures. They're," her voice caught. "They're everywhere." The view screen flickered to life, showing the space around them. What Lyra saw stole her breath. Ships. Dozens of them, materializing from faster than light in perfect military formation. Their design was unlike anything in Alliance databases, angular, armored, bristling with weapons arrays that spoke of serious combat capability. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding the Creveth vessels in seconds. Identification. Lyra whispered. "Unknown," Meris replied.
No matching signatures.
Hull markings show. Terran symbols. Terran. Earth. The Deathworlders had come. Before Lyra could process this, every communication channel activated simultaneously. A voice filled the bridge, deep, calm, carrying an accent Lyra had only heard in intercepted transmissions. "This is Captain James Harding of the Terran Fleet Strike Force Phoenix. We received your distress call, Star Weaver. Stand by for immediate assistance. Creveth vessels, withdraw now or be disabled." The Creveth response was predictable, weapons fire that lanced toward the lead human ship. The Terran vessels didn't even bother with defensive maneuvers. Energy shields that blazed with absorbed impacts, then returned fire with surgical precision. Not to destroy, but to cripple. The Creveth ships went dark in seconds, their weapons and propulsion systems systematically neutralized. "Boarding teams engaging," announced the human voice. "Medical and engineering support inbound to Star Weaver. Dr. Thess, can you hear me?" Lyra grabbed the communications panel with trembling hands. "Yes. Yes, we hear you. We have 18 crew, multiple casualties, life support failing." "Understood. Hold your position. We're coming to you." The sound of Creveth cutting torches stopped abruptly, replaced by weapons fire and shouting in the corridor beyond the bridge. Then silence. Terrible, heavy silence. The bridge door hissed open. Lyra's first thought was that the stories hadn't prepared her. Nothing could have prepared her. The human who entered was tall, significantly taller than any Andorian, with a build that suggested both strength and speed. He wore dark tactical armor marked with medical insignias, and his face. Lyra found herself staring despite her fear. Strong features, intense eyes that swept the bridge with obvious tactical assessment, yet when those eyes found her, they softened with something that looked like concern. "Dr. Thess?" he asked, his voice matching the one from the communications. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. James Harding moved toward her, and Lyra's instincts screamed to flee. This was a Deathworlder, a being evolved to survive conditions that would kill her in minutes. Yet his movements were careful, almost gentle, as if aware of his own strength. I'm Captain Harding. Are you injured? Lyra tried to stand, but her legs buckled. The stress, the failing life support, the blood loss from shrapnel wounds she'd ignored, it all caught up at once. She felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her. The human captain moved with startling speed, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. And perhaps to him, she didn't. Lyra had heard humans evolved under gravity nearly twice what Andoria offered. "I've got you," James said softly. "You're safe now." Lyra looked up at him, this being who shouldn't exist in her ordered universe, this Deathworlder who'd crossed the galaxy to save her. Up close, she could see details the stories never mentioned, the concern in his eyes, the gentleness in how he held her fragile form, the way his breathing had quickened slightly, perhaps from adrenaline, perhaps from something else. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came." "You called," James replied simply, as if breaking a century of quarantine was the most natural thing in the universe. "Medical team, priority 1 casualty." 2 more humans entered, medics with equipment Lyra didn't recognize. But James didn't hand her off. He carried her himself through the damaged corridors of her ship, his team securing the area as they moved. "Your crew?" James asked as they walked. "Alive. All 18. Thanks to you. Then our trip was worth it." He looked down at her, and Lyra saw something unexpected in his expression, not the predatory calculation of a hunter, but warmth. "I'm going to get you to our medical frigate. Our doctors have studied Andorian physiology. We'll take care of you." Lyra should have been terrified. Every instinct, every warning from childhood, told her that humans were dangerous. Yet cradled in this human captain's arms, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, all she felt was safe. "I was so scared," she admitted, surprised at her own honesty. "I know," James said gently. "But you were brave enough to call for help anyway. That takes courage." They reached an airlock where a sleek human shuttle waited. The transition was smooth, and soon Lyra found herself in the Salvation's medical bay, spotlessly clean, filled with advanced equipment, staffed by humans who treated her with careful competence. James stayed by her side as doctors worked, explaining procedures, his presence a calm anchor in the chaos. "Why?" Lyra finally asked. "Why risk everything for strangers?" James met her eyes, and Lyra felt something shift in her chest, a pull she couldn't explain, shouldn't feel, toward this impossible being from a forbidden world. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because—" He hesitated, then smiled slightly, "because I think maybe it's time the galaxy learned what humanity is really about." Aftermath and discovery. 3 days after the rescue, Lyra stood in the observation lounge of the Salvation, watching stars streak past as the human medical frigate maintained formation with Strike Force Phoenix. Her wounds had healed remarkably well under human care, their medical technology was surprisingly advanced, their understanding of alien physiology impressively thorough. The door whispered open behind her. Lyra didn't need to turn to know who it was. Over the past 3 days, she'd become attuned to James Harding's presence in ways that both fascinated and frightened her. "Can't sleep?" James asked, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. "Too much to process," Lyra admitted. 3 days ago, I thought I was going to die. Now I'm aboard a human vessel, being treated by Deathworlders who've shown me more kindness than I've ever received from Alliance species." James chuckled softly. "Deathworlders. I still can't get used to that term. We're just people, Lyra. We breathe, we dream, we hope for better tomorrows." Lyra turned to study his profile. In the starlight, his features seemed softer than that first terrifying moment on the Starweaver's bridge. She'd spent considerable time with James over the past days. He'd visited during her treatments, brought her meals suited to Andorian biology, answered her endless questions about Earth and humanity with patient good humor. "Why do you visit so often?" she asked. "You're the captain of this operation. You must have more important duties." James was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes reflecting the stars. "Because I wanted to. Because—" He hesitated, then turned to face her fully. "Because from the moment I heard your voice on that distress call, something changed. When I found you on that bridge, when I saw your courage despite your fear, He shook his head with a self-deprecating smile. This probably sounds insane. Tell me anyway, Lyra said softly, her skin pulsing with soft amber, an Andorian expression she couldn't quite suppress. I felt protective. Connected. Like I'd found something precious that I couldn't bear to lose. James ran a hand through his hair. I know we just met. I know you probably still see me as something frightening. I just wanted you to know that you're not just another rescue to me. Lyra's hearts hammered. This shouldn't be possible. Cross-species attraction was rare, complicated by biological incompatibilities and cultural divides. Yet standing here with James, feeling the warmth radiating from his body, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, she couldn't deny what she felt. When I was a child, Lyra said quietly, we had lessons about humans. About Earth. We were taught that you were dangerous, aggressive, that your very touch could harm us. She stepped closer, her lavender skin brightening with bioluminescence. But you held me so carefully. Like I was something precious. You are, James said, his voice roughening. Lyra, I've spent my entire career preparing for the day humanity would prove itself to the galaxy. But I never expected. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and gently touched her cheek. His fingers were warm, calloused, impossibly gentle. I never expected to find someone who'd make me forget about everything except keeping them safe. Lyra leaned into his touch, her skin pulsing with rose gold, the Andorian equivalent of a blush. This is complicated. Extremely, James agreed, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I'm human. You're Andorian. Our species have never even officially met. The Alliance will lose their minds over this rescue mission. Getting involved would be irresponsible, Lyra finished. Dangerous. Probably against multiple regulations. Absolutely. They stood there, inches apart, the weight of impossibility between them. Then Lyra made her decision. She rose on her toes, still not quite reaching his height, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, two different species learning each other. James made a soft sound of surprise that melted into something warmer. His arms encircled her carefully, always mindful of his strength, holding her like she was made of starlight. When they parted, Lyra was breathless, her skin cycling through colors she couldn't control. Rose, gold, soft violet. Was that okay? I know humans kiss for intimacy, but I wasn't sure if. James silenced her with another kiss, deeper this time, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other rested at the small of her back. Lyra melted into him, her fingers curling into his uniform, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady strength that had saved her life and now offered something far more precious. More than okay, James murmured against her lips. Perfect. They stood together in the starlight, human and Andorian, Deathworlder and scientist, beginning something that defied every boundary the galaxy had tried to impose. What happens now? Lyra asked, resting her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady rhythm of his heart. Now, James said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, we figure it out together. Your government is sending a delegation to meet us. The Alliance is demanding explanations. We're about to be at the center of the biggest diplomatic incident in galactic history. Sounds terrifying. Probably will be. James tightened his embrace slightly. But I've got you, and you've got me. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Lyra smiled against his chest, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life, held in the arms of the very being she'd been taught to fear. Together, she echoed. Outside the viewport, Strike Force Phoenix maintained its course toward Alliance space, carrying with it the seeds of change that would reshape the galaxy. And at the heart of it all, two souls from different worlds had found each other in the darkness between stars. New horizons. The Galactic Alliance Council chamber on Station Unity Prime was chaos incarnate. Representatives from 47 species filled the amphitheater, their voices rising in a cacophony of arguments, accusations, and demands. At the center of the storm stood Lyra, flanked by her surviving crew, facing down the most powerful governmental body in known space. Across from them, Separated by a symbolic dividing line that suddenly seemed far too meaningful, stood James and a small delegation of human officers. It had been 2 weeks since the rescue, 2 weeks of diplomatic negotiations, medical evaluations, and endless testimonies. 2 weeks during which Lyra and James had stolen moments together whenever possible. Quiet conversations in conference rooms, brief touches when no one was watching, the building certainty that what they'd found was worth fighting for. Now came the reckoning. "Order!" bellowed High Arbiter Vrel, the Corthian chairman whose 4 eyes swept the chamber with obvious frustration. "Dr. Thess, you have the floor. Explain why the Alliance should not bring formal charges against the humans for quarantine violation." Lyra stepped forward, her skin steady violet, the color of determination. Over the past weeks, she'd reviewed every legal precedent, every historical case, preparing for this moment. But as she looked out at the assembled representatives, she realized arguments weren't what was needed. Truth was. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I stand before you alive because humans chose compassion over compliance. My crew of 18 scientists survives because Captain Harding and his people decided that life had value, even if it belonged to strangers who'd been taught to fear them." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Lyra pressed on. "For over a century, we've kept humanity isolated based on fear. Fear of their strength, their endurance, their evolutionary advantages. We called them Deathworlders and convinced ourselves they were too dangerous for contact. But I've spent 2 weeks among them. I've been treated in their medical facilities, eaten at their tables, learned their customs. And I've discovered something the Alliance apparently forgot." She turned, finding James's eyes across the divide. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. "Being strong doesn't make you violent. Having the capacity for harm doesn't mean you choose to cause it. Humans evolved on a harsh world, yes. But that harshness taught them something we've lost, the understanding that survival means protecting each other, that strength exists to defend the vulnerable, that courage means helping even when it costs you everything." Alliance Representative Mora, an elderly Therian with centuries of diplomatic experience, leaned forward. "Pretty words, Dr. Thess. But the humans violated our explicit quarantine. They deployed a military fleet across Alliance space. They engaged and disabled 3 vessels, regardless of whether those vessels were engaged in criminal activity. These are acts that could be interpreted as..." "As what?" Lyra interrupted, her skin flashing crimson with anger. "As heroism? As basic decency? The Kreveth were about to murder my crew. The Alliance patrol ships were days away. Every second I waited for proper channels was a second closer to death. Captain Harding didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate political costs. He heard someone in distress and responded, exactly as the Galactic Maritime Code demands." "The quarantine supersedes," another representative began. "The Maritime Code predates the Alliance itself," James spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. "It's foundational law that recognizes the duty to preserve life in the void. Humanity studied your laws extensively during our isolation. We knew exactly what we were doing when we crossed that line. We weren't declaring war. We were upholding principles the Alliance claims to value." Vrel's 4 eyes narrowed. "Captain Harding, your species was quarantined for good reason. Initial evaluations deemed humans too aggressive, too physiologically dangerous for integration. What has changed?" James stood straighter. "Nothing about our biology has changed, Arbiter. What's changed is your opportunity to see beyond preconceptions. Judge us by our actions, not your fears. We had every right to be angry about the quarantine, isolated without trial, condemned without evidence. Yet when Lyra called for help, we didn't hesitate. We risked everything to save people we'd never met. Because that's what we do," added Commander Okonkwo from behind James. "It's who we are." The chamber erupted again in debate. Lyra watched representatives argue, some supporting humanity's actions, others demanding consequences. She felt James's presence across the divide like a physical pull. Then High Arbiter Vrel raised his manipulators for silence. "I propose a recess for deliberation. 3 days. During which I suggest certain parties engage in more, direct observation. His eyes fixed meaningfully on Lyra and James. The recess was called. Delegates filed out, still arguing. Lyra found herself swept along by her crew until she felt a gentle hand on her elbow. James had crossed the symbolic divide. "Walk with me," he asked quietly. They escaped to Unity Prime's observation deck, away from politicians and protocols. Through the massive windows, 36 star systems were visible, the heart of Alliance space spread before them. "That was quite a speech," James said, pulling her close. Over the past weeks, touching had become natural, essential. "I meant every word." Lyra wrapped her arms around his waist, breathing in his scent. "James, regardless of what the Council decides, I need you to know." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I feel it too. It's insane. We've known each other less than a month. Doesn't make it less real." James cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the bioluminescent patterns on her cheeks. "Lyra, I've spent my entire life preparing to meet aliens, to prove humanity's worth. But I never expected to find you. Never expected to fall for someone so brilliant, brave, and beautiful that she makes me forget entire star systems exist." Lyra's skin glowed rose gold. "That's quite a claim for a Deathworlder. This Deathworlder is completely, irrevocably in love with you." James kissed her softly. "Whatever the Council decides, whatever restrictions they try to impose, I want you to know, you're my future. If they allow it, I'm requesting permanent assignment to Alliance space. I want to be wherever you are." Tears gathered in Lyra's large eyes. "I love you too. Even if my people think I'm insane for falling for a human." "Are they wrong?" James teased. "Absolutely insane," Lyra agreed, pulling him down for another kiss. 3 days later, the Council reconvened. High Arbiter Vrel announced their decision. Humanity's quarantine would be conditionally lifted. Strike Force Phoenix would remain as Earth's diplomatic and defense presence in Alliance space. Formal first contact protocols would begin immediately, and certain personnel, including Captain James Harding, would be assigned to joint Alliance human integration projects, working closely with Andorian scientists like Dr. Lyra Thess. As the chamber erupted in discussion of this new era, Lyra found James's hand in hers. Around them, the galaxy shifted, old barriers crumbling, new possibilities emerging. "Ready to change the universe?" James whispered. Lyra squeezed his hand, her skin cycling through every color of joy. "With you, always." Behind them, through the viewport, the stars shone bright, on humans and Andorians, on Deathworlders and scientists, on love that had found a way across every divide the galaxy could impose. A new chapter had begun. The end.